All right. Hey, all right. So the Wizards won a playoff series. Yes, right there. Washington, Mike Prada doing a little dance for you. The Wizards have done it.
We did it.
It only took 8 years, Mike, but we are finally covering a sweep.
Yeah. How about that?
Yeah.
I sweep the right way too this time.
Yes. Yeah. That first series there, watching Gilbert Arenas limp out of the tunnel for Game 4. What's that Game 3? That was painful. But
actually, and I realize now it's 10 years ago. I'm so slow that I didn't catch that you were saying 8 years as in 8 years of the site, not like
yes.
I was saying, wait a minute, did they sweep someone 8 years ago and I forgot? No, it's not what it is.
No, there's a website, Bullets Fever, that we won't talk about. But yeah,
How about that? Like, so I guess we should start by like seeing if like anyone wants to like come after. I mean, did you pick Toronto? Because I picked Toronto, and I'm stunned. I mean,
yeah, I had Toronto in 7.
I guess if anyone wants to come after us, like in the comments section, like please do, because look, we were wrong. Most of the world was wrong. I mean, even those who thought the Wizards could win thought it would be a tight series. I mean, nobody could have expected a sweep. So bring it on, I guess.
I know, right? Yeah, I mean, I'm very happy to be wrong.
Yeah.
Which is, I mean, I at least I did get that if Randy actually did use Paul Pierce at the 4, like the Wizards would actually look competitive and legitimate, but I didn't realize they'd be that competitive and that legitimate.
Yeah, I was when I heard that they were going to finally actually use that lineup, I kind of amended my thought to like, okay, this series might actually be a close one, and they're not going to get like sped around like they always do against Toronto in the regular season. Mm-hmm. But I was stunned that it was that good early on, and Toronto really never found an answer like for anything.
No.
Like very strange. It's like I thought that maybe Game 1, the winner of that game would feel pretty good about where they were at. Like if the winner of that game, you had two teams struggling, not playing well coming into the series. The winner of that game would kind of feel like they had reason to believe that despite everything they had gone through, they could get to the second round. The loser would just all the negativity that they had from the month and a half prior would just kind of wash over them. And I thought that game might be really important for the Wizards for that reason. And it was a tight game. It was an overtime game. And they won. And as it turned out, Toronto just kind of folded after that.
Yeah. I mean, we talked about, Pierce would be an advantage, but literally to the point where it wasn't just, they got an edge from that, but that was like their, really destructive weapon. That
can't even describe it. How it's so weird that they finally use it. Do you, now that they're all saying that, like, yeah, we were saving that lineup, and we didn't want to overtax Pierce, and we had all these bigs and all that. Like, how much of that do you believe, and how much of that is like, do you think is revisionist history to some degree? Like that maybe they could have won a few more games if they used it more often.
I mean, I think when you talk about, I think it's more about trying to save Pierce from a physical standpoint as compared to like, some kind of mind game. This wasn't about, like Randy Whitman getting them right where they wanted them, and then suckers, it's Paul Pierce. I mean, Paul Pierce is really old, and if you can get by with Pierce as a small forward and still enter the playoffs as a 5th seed, I mean, why wouldn't you do it and just save him for when you actually need it? I mean, the whole thing is you got to be your best at the playoffs. I know I probably sound like Kenny Smith when I say that, but
true though.
Yeah, I mean, that's the whole point. And if you have to give up a few games, because you can't stretch the floor to make that happen, that's what it is. And I know what I was going to say. The Pierce lineup is the Manhattan Project. That's what it is.
Yeah, because everything blows up.
Yeah, it gets tinkered around with forever, and then once it's unveiled, nothing you can really do.
Yeah,
That's it.
I mean, that's definitely true. You raise an interesting point. Give up some regular season games to get better playoff positioning. And I wonder if, like, they looked at, like, they got to a point in the second half of the year where, they're not catching Atlanta. They're not catching Cleveland. Milwaukee is not catching them. So, like, they were kind of, like, resting a lot of guys at the end of the year, and that was, like, what it was. Yeah. I wonder if they kind of decided that, they're 3, 4, or 5. It's not really that big of a difference. I don't know. The other interesting question I would have is, what if they played Chicago? Would they still use that lineup? Because the thing about Toronto is that they don't have like a post-up guy that can really make you pay for playing that lineup. That's why Brooklyn used it, and they used it all year. But they don't have a single. I mean, Patterson killed bigger lineups, but you put a smaller guy on him and you neutralize him. If they play in a different matchup, and Chicago is playing big lineups throughout the playoffs, I wonder if they would have still used Pierce at the 4. I think it's an interesting question.
Yeah, well, and that's the beauty of Pierce at the 4 is if they try to go too big for Chicago, that's where you can use Pierce to kind of like counteract by, okay, if you want to go really big, we'll go really small, and we'll just see who wins out that way. And if they go small with like Mirotic, like they did in that one game at the end of the season, well February-ish, Pierce on Mirotic worked for that 3 minutes they actually played him. So I mean, I don't think it would have been big on big. I think Chicago would have had a better shot this year with Gasol and everything, but throwing Mirotic in there, it kind of, I think they'd almost maybe get too cute with it sometimes, and I think that's where Pierce at the 4 might still work.
Yeah, it's interesting to think about it that way because they did have a lot of bigs and they need to play all of them. But I think that if they had played Chicago, it would have just looked totally different. But the funny thing to move on from this is, Pierce at the 4 was great, but that was not the only reason they won that series. No. I mean, they won in every facet. They completely dominated them. I mean, maybe like in the first couple games, the starting lineup didn't do much, but they certainly dominated in Game 4. I almost wonder if this series was won before it even began. Like just the Paul Pierce, like they don't have it comments, and Toronto like responding with a lot of hot hair, and then we talked about Game 1, and they just kind of folded. Like, was this series won before the two teams even stepped on the court?
I mean, it seems like it. I mean, has anyone ever dominated a mental battle like that, where Paul Pierce is just like, I'm going to come out, you're going to not do this well, I'm going to do it better than you, even though I'm 37, I'm going to destroy you again, and I'm going to come to Canada, and then I'm not going to come back. And he did everything he said.
Yeah. I wonder if the Raptors were just so concerned about beating Pierce. Here's a quote from DeMar DeRozan after the last game of the year. Shout out to Alex Long, our Raptors blogger, for bringing this up on Twitter because I thought it was great. Paul Pierce always he's gonna say something. He said something last year. He's just gonna say something. Just let him talk. I could care less what he said. You just better hope Chicago, or however it's gonna work, win or something, so he won't see what the it is. Now I don't know about you, but this is total hindsight thinking here. But that sounds like someone who, like, the guy at the poker table who acts really super tough when you know that he's very weak, or the guy that is like lobs insults to kind of hide his own insecurity. You know that guy. Like, that's what that quote now reads like to me. Yeah. That quote reads like, you know what, like, we may not actually have the it, so we're gonna have to respond back. I mean, to me, like, that's saying a lot when you could have just said, like, well, that's Paul Pierce is going to talk. We'll see him in the playoffs. Very strange. And Toronto just like had nothing after Game 1 mentally. I mean, Lowry, what happened to Lowry? I mean, a lot of it was Wizards defense, but man, he just looked like he didn't trust anybody after Game 1. That's very crazy.
I really think next week we're going to see Lowry's getting off-season surgery.
You think so?
I think at some point, you don't have it and you just try to push harder, especially a guy like Lowry with that kind of mindset. He's like, oh, well, I only have a leg and a half. Well, I'll just keep pushing anyway, see what happens. I mean, yeah, he definitely made some mental like just baffling decisions there. But when you're physically hampered, that's when you've got that pain running through your mind, you can't make sharp decisions.
It's true.
But
we can now definitely put to rest this idea that Lowry and Wall are comparable players.
Yeah,
it's over.
Yeah,
anyone who says that going forward, I just don't trust them, and it's over. They're not even close. Like that was, I mean, I know Toronto's defense was like a freeway an empty freeway that you can go 100 miles an hour on, but like it's over. Like they had nothing. They couldn't do anything to stop John Wall. They couldn't stop him in transition. They couldn't stop the pick and roll. They couldn't stop him from getting to the basket. They couldn't stop him from just orchestrating someone else. Like it was embarrassing. He dismantled them.
Yeah.
And this is like what last year he was kind of struggling, I think, against Indiana. It's going to be interesting to see what happens against Atlanta. I still think Atlanta is going to be the team they play and pretty soon. But I mean, any thought that, I mean, where would you rank John Wall right now as top point guards? I mean, you got great, CP3 had a great game today. Obviously Steph is great. Russell Westbrook had a great year. But after that, I mean, Kyrie Irving's played well. I know that name is like a 4-letter word to Wizards fans like us.
Ban the heathen! Ban the heathen!
But yeah, who else is there with him at this point? Lillard's having a terrible series up for Portland.
Conley pre-broken face, maybe.
Yeah, and he was having a great series before then. I mean, I don't know. I mean, who else is there with him?
Yeah, I mean, it's like I think you've got Curry, Westbrook, and Chris Paul is like your upper tier, and then like your right under that tier, you've got Wall, Irving, and Conley, and sometimes Lillard, and that's about it.
Yeah,
and I mean, and basically in that tier, it's just whatever you like more in a point guard.
But see, that's the thing about Wall in this series. He was everything. Yeah, I mean, I guess he didn't have huge scoring nights,
right?
But when you can hit jumpers, but he was. The thing that just struck me is that like it got to a point where Toronto literally stopped going for offensive rebounds and he still beat them down the court.
Yeah. I mean, I think that was game one they destroyed them on the boards because they were really trying to consciously not give Wall those fast break opportunities, and it worked for one game.
Mm-hmm.
But then once they got killed and lost, they're like, oh well, we gotta maybe try a little harder on this, and Wall's like, okay. That was it. And and Wall doesn't even have to score if he can get into the paint like he was in this series.
He doesn't.
Yeah. I mean,
he's almost better when he doesn't.
Yeah.
And what's going to be interesting is that I would say Toronto, despite their kind of blitzing tendencies on pick and rolls, I thought their coverage was they played off him a little bit. I think they used the old scouting report, like he's just going to shoot 16-footers the whole game, and we can live with that. But instead what he did is he just kind of manipulated space. I think my favorite play of the game that he made tonight was there was like a delayed fast break, and Gortat was running down the middle, but like there was nothing there. And so he started to clear out to one side, and Wall, I guess, had Amir Johnson switched onto him. That's how they stopped it. Mm-hmm. And he just kind of – what he did is he drove left middle. There was a lot of bodies there. So he drove with no purpose of actually getting all the way to the basket. He knew that if nobody was going to kind of follow Gortat to the corner because he's not really a threat there. But he knew that if he drove to the left just a little bit, then Gortat would duck in, and that would be a layup. And he didn't get an assist on it because Gortat blew the layup and then tipped it in. But that was like the ultimate, like that's the growth of John Wall right there. That's not just speed, that's intelligence. And, the Toronto had no answer for that. Atlanta's going to be interesting, though. They trap. They pressure hard. I know they haven't won the series yet. I know they don't look great right now, but they're another level mentally. Toronto. They're totally so much better on defense.
Yeah. I mean, it's going to be hard too now because Millsap's not the guy you want Pierce guarding in a Pierce's 4 lineup.
Yeah, although Millsap doesn't look that great right now. So
he doesn't.
There's some hope.
Right. Yeah. The one thing.
By the way, DC Brown, just so everybody knows that I'm
yeah.
in the city, even though I don't live here anymore.
No.
Has anyone ever had this? If you're in the comments, I want to know if people have had this drink.
Yes.
Good. Anyway, sorry. Continue your point.
No, you're good. But even if Millsap can't score well, I mean, well, obviously you hope that he tries to score and fails anyway. But Millsap can at least box Pierce out to an extent that maybe Patterson or whoever Toronto threw out there couldn't.
Yeah,
and that's worrisome. But if Atlanta runs Mike Scott out there, I would have Pierce out there every second Mike Scott's out there.
Yeah, and Atlanta, I mean, the Wizards don't use Pierce at the 4. They use it in second and fourth quarters, so that's certainly a possible thing. And Atlanta mixes and matches a lot. Pierce can guard Antic if they run Antic and Horford. Like, that's not a huge problem. I mean, again, you could just guard Antic in general and have the big man guard Millsap. I mean, it's doable.
Yeah.
So the other thing that Pierce to the 4 does, though, is that it's the pressure release on Atlanta's traps, and like Brooklyn doesn't have a guy who can do that. I mean, Teletovic is injured; he's not there. Yeah. The Wizards have a guy if they run that lineup out in Pierce that can just kind of pretend like he's setting the side screen and then just kind of fade away. And I think Wall is smart enough to read out of the traps, to get rid of it. So, but we're talking too much about the next round. We got to enjoy this game a little bit.
Exactly.
Like, how about Bradley Beal in this game? How about him curling and shooting threes like we've been calling for all year? Like, what's up with that?
Yeah, that was, I mean, unlike the other elements of this series, Pearson's 4, Porter stepping up, Beal, I feel like, was the real genuine growth in this series. Actually just having the right mindset, taking the right shots. Although I have to say, in this series, what I've really learned is my whole idea of Beal needs to learn how to shoot more off screens. Maybe dial that back a little bit, because it just seems like anytime he doesn't have that, Leonardo da Vinci form, it gets really bad. And I don't know how to fix that.
But I think he made strides this series. I mean, you buy that. Like, now the narrative with him now is that, we'd rather have him shooting 25 times. We don't want him taking like 10 shots in a game, and we're okay with him taking bad shots, and we're fine with him going. What was he in game 1? Like 5 of 23 or something?
6 of 23, yeah.
Yeah, so we're okay with that. I mean, he's aggressive, and that's the key. We got to get him confident. I wonder what you think about that. I think that makes sense in theory, but I also think that Toronto really let him get off pretty cleanly on those screens. They're smart about how they used him, and they're smart about getting him open to a degree that maybe they weren't in the regular season.
Yeah, well, I'm not the greatest Raptors defense expert, but I think, guys like Ross and DeRozan, they're good ISO defenders-ish, but not so much if you start running them off screens.
Oh, totally agree. 100%. Yeah. Ross was horrible guarding screens, and the Wizards were really smart about exploiting those guys.
Right. Yeah, and then, I think you don't always have to just, run Beal off screens just to set up a shot, but just get the certain defender that isn't great at that spot and run him ragged, give Beal opportunities to get some driving angles that he wouldn't otherwise. And when he's coming off screens, he's got more of a head of steam, which kind of compensates for not having that, explosive first step.
Yeah, 100%. It's going to be interesting in the Hawks series if he, gives Kyle Korver a little taste of his own medicine.
Yeah. And, with the whole, I'm not sure Beal's the guy you want to screener on.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not as much the X's and O's guy, but that just seems like, Beal's just a very strong man, or at least he looks like a very strong man.
Mm-hmm.
And
he's strong down. I would say he's strong. He's it's compact. It's strength.
Yeah, it's like running back strength.
Yeah, it's interesting, though, that he looked like his legs were there after the first few games, because that's my big concern with him always, is that he doesn't play like he trusts his legs. And this
Right.
series, he seemed like he did, and I think that's really encouraging.
Yeah, he just needed that Kyle Lowry juice.
Did. And the other guy who was just awesome in this series that we have to talk about, actually, there are two other guys I want to talk about, but let's talk about Otto Porter first.
Yeah.
Because I thought he was, when you play small, like, it's not just the pushing Pierce up a spot, it's that someone has got to take Pierce's spot and, like, kind of really hold it down.
Mm-hmm.
And for whatever reason, whether they didn't give him the chance or whether he kind of wasn't there mentally or whatever it was, Paul Pierce or Otto Porter was never able to do that during the regular season. I think that's an underplayed thing that is not talked about as much when people are like, well, why didn't they play Pierce at the 4? And one of the answers is that they didn't have good threes.
Yeah.
That's some of that is like just how they constructed their roster. They didn't really find they relied on Rasul Butler, who kind of lost his shooting touch. Martell Webster was hurt, and Porter wasn't quite ready yet.
Right.
But in this series, Otto Porter showed everything that is why they made the number 3 pick. You know, he played great defense. He cut. He was active. I mean, how many times did the Wizards run a pick and roll? Maybe they make one pass, and then suddenly it's Otto Porter that's streaking open for whatever, a 3, a layup, whatever it is. I mean, that is incredibly important, especially it will be in next series too.
Mm-hmm.
Like, some of that was there, but it wasn't all there. So, I mean, now suddenly that he can play 3 minutes, you can unlock that 4 lineup, and it has nothing to do with Pierce's ability to play 4. It's all about whether someone can hold down the 3, and I think that was the key to the series. I think.
Yeah, well, I do think part of it though is chicken and egg, because what enables Porter to have all that room to cut is having Pierce at the 4 to open up your spacing.
That's true too.
If you got Nene and Gortat down there, Porter can't really do much except just park out on the arc where he's getting better, but he's still not quite where you want him, and you can't do the same Otto Porter things that he does. And so, I mean, at the end of the day, you get Porter to, I think, be peak Otto Porter at this stage of his career. And, that's the big victory. Once you see Otto Porter in this role, then you can understand, okay, he's not going to be, a top 2, top 3 scoring option, but he's just the perfect glue guy, I think, for the, pace and space era.
Yeah, that's exactly why they picked him too. I think the other point to make is that when he got his chances, it was, I would say, sparingly with other starters. It was often as part of the second unit with Andre Miller, with Kevin Serafin, and he didn't play quite as much with these starting guys. And suddenly, now that he's with the starters, who don't have Ariza anymore, so they don't have that defensive presence, they don't have that speed, they don't have that length. And Otto, I would say, I mean, is not as good a shooter as Ariza, but a better cutter, and he keeps more possessions alive. Suddenly, when you put him with those starters, it's like he is the guy. His skills blend perfectly, and that's going to be really key again in the second round. I mean, they might use him to cover Korver, and it's just a totally different challenge than covering DeRozan. So it's going to be interesting. And then the other guy I want to mention that I think deserves a lot of credit for this series is Marcin Gortat.
Oh yeah,
I thought he was unbelievable. He totally dominated the paint. He was the last line of defense against any Toronto drive, which is really important because they drive the ball a hell of a lot.
Oh yeah,
and he was great on offense. I thought it was fantastic.
Yeah, it almost, and I don't want to be blasphemous when I say this because I know you've written on it this year, but did this kind of debunk the notion that Nene is the anchor of the Wizards defense?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I would say one thing I would say is that like Gortat did not arrive with a great defensive reputation,
right?
Which I think this is some way to credit the coaching staff, which is much maligned, is that for whatever reason, their style of defense, he's been able to kind of embrace it. I would say that there's something to it. He's just kind of bigger and longer. He can put his arms up, and the key was always just making sure he was in the right spots. And now he has been. And they have a good balance, I think, between like sometimes they're really aggressive with their pressure and sometimes they're not. And they mix it up really well and they seal off the lane. You know, I think that there might be something to that. I mean, Nene has his skills with the way he switches off. He can guard smaller players, you know, and when you put the two of them together, I would say that I don't know what this is. When you put the two of them together, you know, your offense is really a problem sometimes, but just there's just no space to operate. You know, when you go inside, I mean, the Wizards, I think, were like allowed the fewest shots in the restricted area this year of any team in the league.
I remember right.
I remember researching that during my team preview, but I think there's something to that, and I think, and certainly offensively, he's a better player without Nene. And I think now defensively, this series proved that he can hold it down enough when you don't need to name the game as well.
Yeah, I think Nene is still kind of valuable in the sense that he's a better switching center, like you know, and you know I think the Warriors, you know, are showing that you can get by without a quintessential rim protector if you've got, you know, 5 guys that can keep people out of the lane. So I mean, it's not like, you know, Nene is, you know, suddenly lost all his value, but I do think, yeah, like you're saying, it goes to show that Gortat doesn't need Nene to cover his weakness.
Yeah, and I'll say this: I don't want to look again. We're looking ahead again, but I think Nene is going to be more valuable against Atlanta than he was. And I think Horford always plays well, Gortat well. I mean, they're able to. Atlanta doesn't just kind of have these like one-man charges to the rim like Toronto does. You know, Gortat is a better rim protector, but I think Nene is a better kind of defender in every other area. And Atlanta succeeds more with kind of east-west movement than I would say just kind of straight line drives. You know, they have drives, but it's not like Toronto where it's like one guy gets the ball, they create a pick and roll, and he's going to get to the line or flail his arms out in the paint. You know, Gortat is better at stopping that, but I think Nene is going to be much more important in an Atlanta series where you need someone to kind of fight with Horford. And I'm not sure Gortat is that person, which is not a slight on Gortat. They're both important in different ways. But I wouldn't give up on the Nene thing yet just because I just think a lot of it is matchup based.
Yeah, no, I am still pro Nene. He's a great guy. Lovely braids, always useful in the post up, you know, just smack a guy in the face. But yeah, and I agree. I think, you know, assuming we play Atlanta, yeah, he's the guy. And I do think that might be the series that Drew Gooden kind of takes a seat.
Interesting. You think so?
Yeah, I don't know. I keep going back and forth because, you know, yeah, they still need like a quasi stretch 4 to spell Pierce, but I feel like Atlanta could exploit him defensively more than Toronto.
You know, they could, but Atlanta is also bad on the defensive glass, and Gooden can get offensive rebounds. So I don't know about that.
Yeah, I can see that.
No, fight me, man.
Fight
on.
No, but
you want to? Man, I'm right.
I'll defer to the paid person.
The guy who picked Toronto in 6 and thought about making it even less games until he heard about the Pierce thing. Yeah, definitely defer to that person.
Well, don't pick the guy that went on a podcast and thought that Lowry and Wall would equal each other out in this series, and that would give the Raptors an advantage.
So basically, don't listen to us, guys.
Just shut it down now. Just get to bed early. It'll be great. See you tomorrow. No. But I ran the numbers real quick on my calculator here.
Oh, okay.
Yes. Combining Gortat's last 8 games of the regular season in April and his playoffs, he is shooting 66.3% from the floor.
That is great. And now it's not such a huge. I mean, we'll see what it is on the back end of the deal, but right now, with the cap going up, $12 million a year is not terrible at all, given what the cap is going to rise to. Right. Last thing, then I have to go. Was this the most fun you've watched this game? The most fun Wizards game you've seen Like what games compare to this? Because to me, like this goes way up the list for me. I have trouble thinking of other games. Maybe Game 3 in the 2008 series when they just kind of killed the Cavs in that series that with Soldier Boy there. That was great. One of the games last year, I thought Game 5 was great. The Indiana series, Game 4, the Chicago series. I mean, where is this one ranked for you?
Oh yeah, it's definitely top 5. I think a sneaky underrated game was 2009 when the Wizards were just completely out of the playoff picture, and then Cleveland comes to town. You know, they're going to be the top seed. It was the first time they had everyone healthy that season, and they rolled them.
Yeah, I do remember that game. Wasn't it the crab dribble game, or am I thinking of a different game?
No, you're thinking of a different game. Like Antoine Jameson had a dunk. like they were wearing, both teams were wearing throwbacks. The Wizards were in their Zephyrs, and Cleveland had those yellow and red flowery things. Like that was just, I guess maybe that's more a personal thing for me, but that's up there. Trying to think, but yeah, I mean, what was great about this game and this series in general is for the first time, the Wizards have had a team in my lifetime that's just been, we're going to beat you. You can't do anything about it. Like they stomped through Toronto.
Yeah. That was, I mean, other 4-0 series are not been as lopsided as this one.
Yeah.
I mean, Houston might end 4-0, but the Wizards were much more lopsided. New Orleans was much more competitive.
Right.
In Golden State, Boston was more competitive than Toronto was. I mean, that's definitely a good point.
I mean, granted, that says probably just as much, if not more, about Toronto than Washington. But still, I mean, there have been so many times during the regular season even that the Wizards should have cruised and just not done it. And
the Miami game in particular.
Don't mention that game ever.
I'm sorry.
From the cash, it is gone.
You're right. I'm sorry. You're right.
It is a win. 10 years from now, when we go back and look at that, we'll be like, you know what? That was a competitive game.
Yeah, Goran Dragic played. Yeah, he was great.
Yeah. I mean, I can't even do that. But yeah, I mean, other than
it's hard to find one. I mean, looking at a couple comments, I mean, most people are saying this was definitely the most fun they've had. I don't think that's just being a prisoner of the moment. I mean, this game was never close. Like at halftime, you knew it was over, and it was just like this barrage of great ball movement, and threes, and layups, and fast breaks, and all that they could do was hit these like impossible shots. I mean, the final margin was 31, and it felt much more than that. Like, it's really hard to think of another game. You know, there are other games that maybe had more satisfactory endings, but were tenser. Like this is just like a domination. I can't really think of one that since the site started that was more satisfying. But if other people have ones that I'm missing, like please let me know. But like, I don't know that I thought that I had a feeling there would be a sweep, but I didn't think it would be a sweep like that.
I mean, I was emotionally prepared because it's one of those things. Once you know you've got a team beaten, like how do you even come out? And the Raptors were like, all right, let's give them 6 minutes, and we'll see what happens. But it's just psychologically, like, I mean, even if you're just going to work and you're going to have a really crappy day at work, you go out there, you try to put it on a brave face for an hour, and then you're just like, wow, this really is going to suck, isn't it? And then
what you do is you convince yourself it's not going to be a really crappy day.
Yeah.
You give yourself all these reasons that it's going to work out, and then the second that one thing doesn't work as you think, it's like it all just falls apart.
Yeah, you just
like that.
It's over. Just got to pack it in, and then you're just waiting for the clock to go. Yeah.
And Toronto, I just feel like gave it so much in the fourth quarter of that game the other night on Friday, and they just had nothing. I mean, DeRozan was just so aggressive. and Lowry was so aggressive. It was like they had nothing left, I think.
Yeah.
Look, to me, like that was so much fun. I know that like some Wizards people are kind of going to be like, well, you guys are so down on the team, coming into the playoffs, and now you're so excited, and like we told you so. Like I don't really, to me, it doesn't really matter. Like the playoffs are so much fun. We haven't had this in a long time, and we're both thrilled to be wrong about this series not being competitive. I'm trying not. Last year I got super, like, I thought that like the Indiana series would be pretty easy. I thought they could beat them, and they obviously didn't. Like I'm trying this year not to temper my expectations for the second round.
Right.
Even though Atlanta, just like Indiana was last year, is struggling, I'm trying to temper my expectations. Atlanta's going to be so much better defensively, and they have the capability of being a great offensive team, even though they haven't shown it yet.
Right.
I'm trying to temper my expectations, but look, if they play like this, it's hard to see anyone beating them. So we'll see how the rest of the playoffs go. I mean, look, Kevin Love hurt his shoulder today, and I can't believe I'm talking like this.
Everything's coming up Wizards, baby.
So
I mean, LeBron is still kind of a significant player, and the Cavs might have the best. The Cavs might have the best role player in the NBA, Kyrie Irving.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah,
a nice 3-and-D point guard.
Yeah, you gotta have those to succeed. So
yeah, I'm trying to get too ahead of myself, but I'm looking forward because I think it will be the Hawks. And I'm looking forward to that series because I like watching the Hawks play, and I want to see. Obviously, the Wizards got killed by them when the Hawks were at their best, but the two teams are very different now. I'd love to see how that series will play out.
Yeah, no, I think it should be more competitive than anyone would have anticipated if people said, "Oh, it's going to be Wizards Hawks second round." I'm not expecting a win, but now if you said the Wizards would win, I wouldn't be like, I wouldn't be
God.
shocked. Yeah.
Well, who got injured on Atlanta?
Right. Yeah.
You wouldn't do that anymore.
Yeah. So, we'll see what happens. But, just one quick question for you, just because I guess we should get this out there. Randy Whitman's back next year now, right?
I mean,
no matter what happens.
I don't have any inside info, but I feel like he was kind of always back. I don't think that. I think a lot of the noise about them possibly replacing it was coming from people on the outside. I found it hard to believe that they would get rid of him, but we'll see. I mean, I would think so, but again, I don't take that as like I'm reporting anything or whatever. Like it's just my guess.
Just a guess. Yeah. I think it's just at this point, maybe they over the summer they're like, well, we're bringing in a new coach, like offensive coordinator guy, to he's gonna do some new things, but I think what they're just going to do is probably either Nene or Chris, I think, probably ends up getting shipped out. And
Nene or who?
Chris Humphries.
Oh, I bet they keep most of the game together.
Really?
I think so, yeah. I mean, because they're all in on 16 anyway. I mean,
yeah, but I think Drew. I don't think Drew's coming back.
Yeah, we'll see. I don't know, man. It's too early for this stuff, I think.
It is.
We're not
got finals to win. Got finals to win. So.
But anyway, guys, thanks for having me.
Yes.
I'm sorry I got to run. But just want you all to know I'm still repping my team, still excited, still pumped about this win, and I keep on holding it down. I miss you guys. And maybe when we get to game one of the finals, I'll come back.
Yeah, sounds good, man.
All right. See you later, Jake.
Yeah, have a good one, man.